Normally, I prefer reading manga to watching anime. The reason being that I'm a fast reader. Always have been. So the time it takes to watch an episode of an anime, I can usually read an entire volume. And in many cases, after the manga gets adapted, I still prefer it to the anime anyway. But every so often, there comes an adaptation so unbelievably well done that it kinda surpasses the source material. Frieren is one such anime. I absolutely adore the manga, but like Demon Slayer before it, the anime is on another level entirely. You can really tell that the people at Studio Madhouse really cared about adapting it. So much so that I'd consider it damn near perfect. And a major reason for that is how they handle the theme of time. Time permeates every facet of Frieren, so it needs to be handled with the utmost care. Luckily, Madhouse 100% understood the assignment when they took on this monumental project. There is a lot of symbolism in this show, some of it subtle, and some of it screaming out of each and every frame. A great example of this is when Himmel gives the mirrored lotus ring to Frieren. The manga version is pretty snappy, taking place over a page and a half. As this is a memory shown from Frieren's perspective, the quick pace makes sense since, at the time, it was a rather insignificant event for her. Now, I found it to be a quick read, but part of the beauty of manga is that you set your own pace, so you can linger on each panel as long as you want. And why wouldn't you want to take the time to drink in this gorgeous piece of art? The way Himmel kneels before Frieren, gently holding her left hand as he places the mirrored lotus ring on her finger, is a very easy read in that he's basically proposing to her. But the composition of the panel says so much more. With Himmel kneeling, he is the shortest subject in the frame to reflect his shorter lifespan compared to the near immortal Frieren. The clock tower is placed high on the page to show that neither is above the flow of time. However, the clock face sits over Himmel's head to further signify that his time is more limited. This is why his eyes are closed as he puts the ring on her finger, so he can feel the moment, not merely see it. He is living in it, savoring it before it becomes a precious memory. Hence the smile on his face, despite knowing that it probably won't mean nearly as much to her. Time doesn't loom over Frieren the same way, so she can only look at Himmel, unable to understand the significance of this moment as she cannot see his eyes, which are often used to show understanding in media. Depending on the expressions, eye contact can mean that two characters are on the same page, or that feelings are being properly conveyed, but here we have them unable to connect in that way. The anime handles things a little differently. The pacing is slowed down, giving us more time with each individual moment. As if while looking back, Frieren is finally starting to understand the importance this one simple act had, not only for Himmel, but for her as well. His cape billows as he kneels down before her, just as it should for someone as beautiful and dramatic as he. He gently lifts her hand, backlit by the light of the sunset, and places the ring on her finger. At least I'm assuming that this is sunset, because that way it would be symbolic of their time together inevitably coming to an end. More important is the solemn smile on his face as she looks at him. He clearly knows what the ring and this act means, yet is also all too aware that their time together is fleeting, and that she will not understand. At least not yet. But most importantly, we have the placement of the clock tower. We see it twice in this scene, both times in a slightly different place than in the manga. We first see it as we follow them from behind, then again as Himmel gives the ring to Frieren. In both instances, it is situated between them, filling that space in the frame like an invisible wall. This shows that no matter how much love they may have for each other, time will always get between them. Even if she had realized her feelings sooner, she was always doomed to lose him early.
Is that enough? Should I keep going?
Why are you the way that you are?
Time marches ever onward, but there will always be those that cannot accept that with time comes change.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Ziria is one such individual, and there are two scenes that help illustrate this beautifully. After Flamme has passed and Frieren delivers her final request to Ziria, the older elf is upset with her former apprentice's request to help cultivate humanity's magic. This is the first time we overtly see her disposition towards time. She does not want the state of magic to change, and has refused to be a part of it doing so until she was given an unknown reason 50 years ago. As the two elves talk, they are in a forest. A lot of times, forests are symbolic of change, usually for the worse as their branches loom overhead to block out the comfort of the sky. But here they represent something else, Ziria's narrow-minded outlook about magic and the future. She is so opposed to change that she isolates herself with only her grimoires to keep her company. The forest normally blocks out her view of the world changing around her, but no matter how hard she tries to deny it, the light still shines through.
Oh God, natural light!
In the manga, we see the sky clearly through the canopy 3 times, and all 3 times are when they are talking about Flamme. First is Ziria asking if Frieren knew Flamme's favorite spell, something that Ziria remembers vividly. Secondly, when talking about the legendary mage's dream for everyone to be able to use magic. And finally, it is shown when Frieren mentions her master's need to make decisions quickly, but that one's a little less important. These are meaningful for one particular reason. While Ziria is telling Frieren what Flamme's favorite spell was, or how revolting she finds the dream, the panel does not show the sky, but it does set up a point for later. In the third trial, Ziria asks 2 characters what their favorite spells are. First is Frieren, whose favorite spell is the same as her master's, creating a field of flowers. The other is Verbal, who calls magic a tool for killing and does not have one, showing us that he shares Ziria's narrow-minded views on magic. Now, the important thing to note here is that Frieren has helped advance magic with her research into Zoltrak, and has been nurturing Fern, who is probably going to be the next great mage, while the number of mages has dwindled since Ziria founded her magic association, partly because she only seems to let in people like Verbal, who see magic the same way she does. But while she might try to control it, there will always be those who wish to learn magic that she does not approve of, and they will keep at it, regardless of what she wishes. The anime handles this a little differently, instead using light to convey the point. There are cracks of light seeping in between the trees, but neither of the elves are illuminated by any of it. We see Ziria's memory of a young Flamme run past her and into a small patch of light as she gathers flowers. The first time we see Ziria in the light is while she is passing through the patch of flowers where the memory of her student is. Her memory of the young girl even running alongside her to grab her hand, almost leading her through the light. Since we know that Zedia sort of follows that dream in the future, this shows that she cannot escape it, even though she shortly steps back into the darkness. Lastly, for this particular part, we see young Flamme run ahead of her master and out of the forest into the light where she can overlook the future. But we're not done with this scene just yet. We still have the elves on the cliff. Here we see them looking towards the setting sun, which in this instance symbolizes the end of the era of elves. In the manga, we see the two elves from behind, as the elder says that the era of humans will soon arrive. We can't see her expression, but as we do see the disappointment on her face when she turns away from the sunset to tell Frieren that humans will overtake elves, we can assume she's making a similar face. When she tells Frieren that she will either be killed by the Demon King or a human mage, her mouth is turned up in a smug grin, clearly trying to scare the younger elf. But Frieren doesn't see the world the same way. She smiles as she looks at the sunset, thinking about all of the different kinds of magic she will get to see in the future. Again, the anime uses lighting to enhance the scene. When talking about who could kill Frieren, Zedia turns away from the light and her face is cast into shadow. We see her turn back a little as Frieren steps closer to the light, saying that she's looking forward to the future. The scene ends with Frieren's face illuminated by light as she looks forward to the future, while Zedia is still facing back towards her dark forest and the past it represents. The other scene involving Zedia's denial of the future is one from the first trial of the first class mage exam. During Frieren's battle with Denkin, we are told that the barrier created by Zedia cannot be broken by sheer force. But Zenza mentions that someone has been analyzing it. Genau immediately dismisses this, saying that no one could surpass the Great Mage. Since we later see Zedia's narrow-mindedness in who she thinks deserves to be a first-class mage, we can view the barrier as her need for control over magic, and those who wield it. It might seem like protection at first, but because the barrier is so strong that it doesn't even let rain get through, it severely limits the potential of some mages, like Kana, who controls water. Not only does this create tension from a narrative standpoint, it shows just how tight of a grip Zedia is willing to have over magic. This is also reflected in the two first-class mages that overlook the exam. Genau is very much aligned to Zedia's way of thinking, saying that those who die here aren't worthy of becoming first-class mages. He also shows blind faith in her strength when he asks Zenza if she thinks there is a mage that could surpass their master. Zenza, on the other hand, doesn't want to see the potential of mages cut short by death. She calls herself a pacifist. A lot. An annoyingly high amount considering she willingly puts them all in danger in the second exam. A real pacifist wouldn't send a bunch of people into a dungeon that barely anyone comes out of alive.
I am a pacifist. I abhor fighting and conflict.
This test is just the sort of thing a pacifist like her would put together.
This is a kind test. And a peaceful one.
You created a trial that would minimize bloodshed.
Don't forget I'm a pacifist.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
She also seems to be worried about Frieren's analysis of the barrier, showing that she thinks change will come where Genau is stuck in the status quo. When Frieren breaks the barrier in the manga, there's not a lot in terms of symbolism, other than the fact that Frieren is breaking a small hole into Zedia's control to allow another mage to reach her full potential. Far as I can tell, that's it. It's pretty straightforward. We see shards of the barrier falling around Genau and Zenza to show that what they have known to be true for so long is not as unshakable as they thought, especially so in Genau's case. While Zenza grabs an umbrella to protect herself from the rain, showing that she's quicker to adapt, Genau just sits in it as he tries to figure out how it was even possible for this to happen. The anime turns it up a notch. When Frieren begins to cast her spell, we cut to Genau and Zenza. Genau is looking at his tea while Zenza is turned towards the light generated by the spell, showing us not only his indifference since he doesn't believe the barrier can break, but also Zenza's desire to see a brighter future for magic. His face is even shadowed as he says it's impossible. As Frieren finishes her spell, she is almost completely eclipsed in its light as it flies up towards the barrier. We cut to Zenza, almost fully illuminated by the spell as she watches, saying that the barrier will break, and a surprised Genau, his face now also illuminated as he turns towards the light. It cuts to a wide shot of them in the barrier, and after a bright flash, the barrier shatters above them. Here we see the shards of the barrier falling along the edges of the frame around Frieren, as the last embers of her spell float upward, showing that the old way of thinking will fall, and that the future Frieren is helping to bring will take over. But that's enough of Boomer Zeria. Let's move on to something more fun, the Chad Heiter. And by fun, I obviously mean kinda sad. Fern's training with Frieren and her last days with Heiter can be seen as a cautionary tale about pushing oneself too far. Frieren even says as much to Heiter that is what Fern is doing with her training. She's going too far, too fast, trying to do too much in a short time. The result of that being a seemingly complete lack of motivation once she's achieved her goal of becoming a full-fledged mage, even saying as much to Zenza later on. Now why would I immediately start talking about Fern when I just said we're moving on to Heiter? Simple, because unlike Zeria, he's trying to nurture the future, becoming the reason for Fern's drive. She wants to repay him for saving her life, but fears that he will die before she can show him that she'll be fine after he passes. So what we're going to look into is her memory of meeting her surrogate father and her becoming a full-fledged mage. Firstly, we have the memory. In the manga, she stands on the cliff overlooking her ruined village. The cliff where she stands is almost devoid of life, just some grass and weeds. But Heiter sits at the edge of lush flora as he speaks with her. This shows that Fern stands at the end of her life. If she continues, all the potential she may have dropping off into oblivion. But if she goes towards Heiter, there is so much more for her, so much beauty her life could behold. But there's more to it than just that. Heiter sits at the edge of the forest to signify that his life is mostly behind him and that he is running out of time. We see Fern turned away from the end of her life towards a verdant future that is almost boundless, continuing past the page. But Heiter faces a relatively short walk to the cliff and the end of his life. The anime takes this even further. While both have Fern needing to shoot a rock on a cliff face beyond a great divide, there is a bit more symbolism in the anime. Echoing how she met Heiter, Fern stands on the cliff, facing the end of the life she has known. But instead of it being a desolate cliff, the manga and anime both show that there is more life here. It is only the end of what she has known, and shooting the rock on the other side symbolizes that she is ready to move on to greater things. So in the anime, when Fern recalls meeting Heiter standing on that cliff, we see that it is much more desolate than in the manga. Heiter sits under a dying tree to show that he is withering. But where this gets really fun is how the anime handles the scene where Fern shoots through the distant rock. The manga doesn't do a whole lot with this, just showing her shooting across the cliff. But the anime improved it to the point that I was jumping up and down with joy when I noticed what they did. We see Fern walking towards the rock, her goal to show that she will be fine without Heiter. We see Heiter looking out his window into the light before seeing her foot step near the edge of the cliff's face, showing how close she is to the end. Where at first it seemed like there wasn't much for her future if she didn't turn away from the cliff, we see a lush forest waiting for her for when she proves to herself that she is worthy to walk into it. It's a shame that she doesn't always seem to have much motivation, or that she doesn't think she likes magic all that much anymore. Burnout is very real, and I feel for her. But saying that she doesn't enjoy her life would just be wrong. She may be tired of dealing with Frieren and Stark's bad habits all the time, but we've been shown glimpses that she still has that zest for life, and that she's making good use of the life that Heiter helped her claim back. Her dance with Stark is a great example of not only Fern living in the moment, but also Madhouse improving on the source material. It's fine in the manga, but its importance feels a bit diminished since it's only a few panels. But in the anime, it's a full, drawn-out sequence for us to take in. And just look at Fern's expression throughout. She's living it, almost like she doesn't want it to end. No, seriously, look at her. Look at my daughter and tell me this isn't one of the best days of her life.
She's the cutest little thing. You should see her.
I'm sure she's adorable, but stop calling me to gush over your daughter, and on a military line too.
Not just my daughter, Colonel. I'll gush over my wife too.
It's no wonder why Frieren has been doing so well. There is just so much to love about this story. It's the first time in a long while that I wanted to really take my time with something, to savor every moment. Even though I generally prefer manga because I set the pace, the anime was so good that I didn't mind it slowing me down. I actually wanted it to. And it reminded me of an important quote from a movie, one that I didn't even like, but I think it's a philosophy that more of us need to embrace. Myself included.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while. You could miss it.